Hello students, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am your English teacher. Today I am going to read out a lesson from your English textbook NCERT, Honeycomb, textbook in English for class 7. Before you read, a king has 3 questions and he is seeking answers to them. What are the questions? Does the king get what he wants? 3 questions. Part 1. The thought came to a certain king that he would never fail if he knew 3 things. These 3 things were: what is the right time to begin something? Which people should he listen to? What is the most important thing for him to do? The king therefore sent messengers throughout his kingdom, promising a large sum of money to anyone who would answer these 3 questions. Many wise men came to the king, but they all answered his questions differently. In reply to the first question, some said, the king must prepare a timetable and then follow it strictly. Only in this way, they said, could he do everything at its proper time. Others said that it was impossible to decide in advance the right time for doing something. The king should notice all that was going on, avoid foolish pleasures, and always do whatever seemed necessary at that time. Yet others said that the king needed a council of wise men who would help him act at the proper time. This was because one man would find it impossible to decide correctly without help from others the right time for every action. But then others said that there were some things which could be urgent. These things could not wait for the decision of the council. In order to decide the right time for doing something, it is necessary to look into the future, and only magicians could do that. The king therefore would have to go to magicians. In their answers to the second questions, some said that the people most necessary to the king were his counselors. Others said the priests. Few others chose the doctors, and yet others said that his soldiers were the most necessary. To the third questions, some said science. Others chose fighting, and yet others religious worship. As the answers to these his questions were so different, the king was not satisfied and gave no reward. Instead, he decided to seek the advice of a certain hermit who was widely known for his wisdom. The hermit lived in a wood which he never left. He saw no one but simple people and saw the king put on ordinary clothes. Before he reached the hermit's hut, the king left his horse with his bodyguard and went on alone. As the king came near the hermit's hut, he saw the hermit digging the ground in front of his hut. He greeted the king and continued digging. The hermit was old and weak, and as he woke, he breathed heavily. The king went up to the hermit and said, I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer 3 questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I need most? And what affairs are the most important? The hermit listened to the king, but did not speak. He went on digging. "You are tired," said the king. "Let me take the spade and walk in your place." "Thanks," said the hermit, giving the king his spade. Then he sat down on the ground. When the king had dug 2 beds, he stopped, repeated his questions. The hermit gave no answers, but stood up, stretching out his hand for the spade, and said, "Now you rest, and let me walk." But the king did not give him the spade and continued the dig. 1 hour passed, then another. The sun went down behind the trees, and at last the king stuck the spade into the ground and said, "I came to you, wise man, for an answer to my questions. If you can give me no answer, tell me so, and I will return home." "Here comes someone running," said the hermit. Comprehension check. Why did the king want to know answers to 3 questions? Messengers were sent throughout the king. Options: 1. To fetch wise man, to find answers to the questions, to look for the wise hermit, to announce a reward for those who could answer the questions. Mark your choice. Now part 2. The king turned round and saw a bearded man running towards them. His hands were pressed against his stomach, from which blood was flowing. When he reached the king, he fainted and fell to the ground. The king and the hermit removed the man's clothing and found a large wound in his stomach. The king washed and covered it with his handkerchief, but the blood would not stop flowing. The king redressed the wound until at last the bleeding stopped. The man felt better and asked for something to drink. The king brought fresh water and gave it to him. By this time the sun had set and the air was cool. The king, with the hermit's help, carried the wounded man into the hut and laid him on the bed. The man closed his eyes and lay quiet. The king, tired by his work and the work he had done, lay down on the floor and slept through the night. When he awoke, it was several minutes before he could remember. Where he was and who the strange bearded man lying on the bed was. "Forgive me," said the bearded man in a weak voice. When he saw that the king was awake, "I do not know you and have nothing to forgive you for," said the king. "You do not know me, but I know you. I am that enemy of yours who swore revenge on you, because you put my brother to death and seized my property. I knew you had gone alone to see that hermit, and I made up my mind to kill you on your way home. But the day passed, and you did not return, so I left my hiding place, and I came upon your bodyguard, who recognized me and wounded me. I escaped from him, but I should have died if you had not dressed my wounds. I wished to kill you, and you have saved my life. Now if I lived, I will serve you as your most faithful servant and will order my sons to do the same. Forgive me." The king was very happy to have made peace with his enemy so easily and to have won him over as a friend. He not only forgave him but said he would send his servants and his own doctors to look after him, and he promised to give back the man his property. Leaving the wounded man, the king went out of the hut and looked round for the hermit, Before going away, he wished once more to get answers to his questions. The hermit was on his knees sowing seeds in the bed that had been dug the day before. The king went after the hermit and said, "For the last time, I beg you to answer my questions, wise man." "You have already been answered," said the hermit, still bending down to the ground and looking up at the king as he stood before him. "How have I been answered? What do you mean?" "Do you not see?" replied the hermit. "If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday and had not dug these beds for me, you would have gone away. Then that man would have attacked you, and you would have wished you had stayed with me. So the most important time was when you were digging the beds. And I was the most important man. And to do me good was your most important business. Afterwards, when the man ran to us, the most important time was when you were caring for him, because if you had not dressed his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important man, and what you did for him was your most important business. Remember that there is only one time that is important, and that time is now. It is the most important time because it is the only time we have any power to act. The most important, the most necessary person is the person you are with at a particular moment. For no one knows what will happen in the future and whether we will meet anyone else. The most important business is to do that person good, because we were sent into this world for that purpose alone. Leo Tolstoy, retold. So this story, the 3 lessons, has been retold. That originally is a piece written by Leo Tolstoy, the same writer who had written War and Peace, Anna Karenina, and so many classics. So this story, 3 questions, is basically a philosophical concept. See, but it has its own individualities, its practical uses in our day-to-day life also. In this lesson, the writer tries to draw our attentions towards 3 most important aspects of our life, represented by the 3 questions in the lesson. And the answers we get, we learned, as the hermit reveals to the king, is that the most important time, that time is now. And the most necessary person is the person you are with at a particular moment. And the most important business is to do that person good. So these are very practical. Comprehension check. Complete the following sentences by adding the appropriate parts of the sentences given in the box. Many wise men answered the king's questions. And you have been given blank. Someone suggested that there should be a council of wise men. Dash. Someone else suggested that the king should have a timetable. Dash. The king requested the hermit. Dash. The king washed and dressed the bearded man's wound. Dash. And you have been provided with a hint. But the bleeding would not stop to answer 3 questions. But their answers were so varied that the king was not satisfied and followed it strictly. To help the king ache at the right time. So you have to choose from the hints given in the box. Walking with the text. Answer the following questions. Why was the king advised to go to musicians? 2. In answer to the second questions, whose advice did the people say would be important to the king? 3. What suggestions were made in answers to the third questions? 4. Did the wise man win the reward? If not, why not? 5. How did the king and the hermit help the wounded man? 6. Roman 1. Who was the bearded man? 2. Why did he ask for the king's forgiveness? 7. The king forgave the bearded man. What did he do to show his forgiveness? What were the hermit's answers to the 3 questions? Write each answer separately. Which answer do you like most and why? Now, walking with a language. Match items in list A with their meanings in list B. An example is there. Fainted, lost consciousness. A, B. In the column A, you have words wounded, awoke, forgive, faithful, pity, bats, returned. In column B, got up from sleep, give back small patches of ground for plants, severely injured, pardon, loyal, feel sorry for. Use any 3 of the above words in sentences of your own. You may change the form of the words. Each of the following sentences has 2 blanks. Fill in the blanks with appropriate forms of the words given in the bracket. He has dash to help me. Do you think he will remember his dash? In the bracket, you have the words promise. He has promised to help me. Do you think he will remember his promise? Reminder number 1. The dash said that only fresh evidence would make him change his dash. You can say the judge said that only fresh evidence would make him change his judgment. That. You have some more. You have to try this. Now, speaking and writing. Imagine you are the king. Narrate the incident of your meeting the hermit. Begin like this. The wise man answered my questions, but I was not satisfied with their answers. One day I decided to go and meet the hermit. ... But 2. Imagine you are the hermit. Write briefly the incident of your meeting the king. Begin like this. One day I was digging in my garden. A man in ordinary clothes came to see me. I knew it was the king. ... Do you know that an ostrich really sticks its head in the sand to hide from an enemy? It is a fun fact, and you can find the answer for this on page number 32. Does an ostrich as a bird, really stick its head in the sand to hide from enemy? Now let me summarize the lesson for you. Once a king thought of finding out answers to 3 questions. Which the king believed if he had the answers, he would never fail in life. The questions were: what is the right time to begin something? Which people should he listen to? What is the most important thing for him to do? He sent messengers throughout his kingdom to announce a reward for those who could answer the questions. Many wise men came, but their answers were so varied that they did not satisfy the king. So the king decided to seek the advice of a wise hermit. The hermit lived in the forest. He met no one but the simple people. So the king put on ordinary clothes and went to see the hermit in disguise. When the king reached the hermit's hut, the hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. He greeted the king and went on digging. The king requested him to answer his 3 questions. The hermit listened to the king but did not speak. The hermit was old and weak. He was breathing heavily. The king took the spade from him and started digging. After some time, the king repeated his questions, but the hermit pointed towards a bearded man who came running towards them. His hands were pressed against his bleeding stomach. As he reached the king, he fainted and fell to the ground. The king dressed his wound. The king and the hermit carried him into the hut and laid him on the bed. Next morning, the bearded man asked for the king's forgiveness. He told the king that he was his enemy. He wanted to kill the king because the king had put his brother to death and seized his property. But the king forgave the man. Before leaving, the king wished once more to get answers to his questions. The hermit was showing seats in the beds. The king repeated his questions. The hermit replied that the most important time is now. The most important person is he with whom you are at a particular time. The most important business is to do that person good. The king left the hermit's hut fully satisfied with the 3 answers to his 3 questions. Now let's discuss the comprehension check. Here we have the questions. Why did the king want to know answers to 3 questions? The king wanted to know answers to 3 questions to avoid failures in life. The king believed that if he knew the answers to these 3 questions, he would never fail in his life. Number 2, messengers were sent throughout the kingdom. Roman number 2, to find answers to the questions. That is the most appropriate answers. Now let's try comprehension check 2, page number 14. Complete the following sentences by adding the appropriate parts of the sentences given in the box. Many wise men answered the king's questions, but their answers were so varied that the king was not satisfied. 2. Someone suggested that there should be a council of wise men to help the king to act at the right time. 3. Someone else suggested that the king should have a timetable and follow it strictly. 4. The king requested the hermit to answer 3 questions. 5. The king washed and dressed the bearded man's wound, but the bleeding would not stop. Next, we have the working with the text. Answer the following questions. 1. Why was the king advised to go to magicians? The king was advised to go to the magicians because some wise men believed that only magicians could tell the proper time for doing things. So the king was advised to go to the magicians. Following the advice of some wise man. In answer to the second questions, whose advice did the people say would be important to the king? In answer to the second questions of the king, some wise men said that the people most necessary to the king were his counselors. Some others said the priests were the most important. In the opinion of a few others, the doctors were the most necessary. And some others said that his soldiers were most necessary to the king. What suggestions were made in answer to the third questions? 3 suggestions were made in answer to the third questions. These were science, fighting, and religious worship. I repeat, science, fighting, and religious worship. Did the wise man win the reward? If not, why not? No, the wise man did not win any reward because their answers were so varied, so different. They could not satisfy the king with their answers. Question number 5. How did the king and the hermit help the wounded man? The king and the hermit removed the wounded man's clothes. The king washed his wound and dressed it twice. In fact, the king and the hermit saved his life. Number 6, Roman 1. Who was the bearded man? 2. Why did he ask for the king's forgiveness? The bearded man was the king's enemy. The bearded man was the enemy of the king and he wanted to kill him, but the king showed kindness to him by saving his life, so he asked for the king's forgiveness. And number 7, the king forgave the bearded man. What did he do to show his forgiveness? The king promised to return his property. He also promised to send his servants and his own doctors to look after the man. Question number 8. What were the hermit's answers to the 3 questions? The 3 answers were: the most important time is now. The most important person is he with whom you are at a particular time. Number 3, the most important business is to do that person good. Write each answer separately. Which answer do you like most and why? This is subjective, this is personal. You have to give your own opinion here. Working with a language. Match items in list A with their meanings in list B. Fainted, lost consciousness. Column A, column B. I will tell you the answer. Wounded, severely injured. Awake, get up from sleep. Forgive, pardon. Faithful, loyal. Pity, to feel sorry for. Bats, small patches of ground for plants. Return, give back. That's it. Use any 3 of the above words in sentences of your own. You may change the form of the words. You have to do this yourself. As an example, I will choose this word, forgive. To forgive is divine. So the old saying says, to err is human and to forgive divine. Number 2, each of the following sentences has 2 blanks. Fill in the blanks with appropriate forms of the words given in a bracket. You have the example here. You have an example. He has promised to help me. Do you think he will remember his promise? That I already told you the answer for this. Roman number 1. The judge said that only fresh evidence would make him change his judgment. Like that. Roman number 2. I didn't notice any serious difference of opinion among the debaters, although they differ from one another over small points. Number 3. It's a fairly simple question to answer, but will you accept my answer as final? Answer. Same spelling. Number 4. It isn't necessary that necessity should always be the mother of invention. Number 5. Hermits are wise men. How they acquire their wisdom, no one can tell. Next, the committee has decided to make Jagdish captain of the team. The decision is likely to please everyone. Next, asking for forgiveness is as novel as willingness to forgive. Speaking and writing, this you have to do yourself. This needs your imagination. Try this, it will be fun. You have been provided with the introduction also already 1 and 2. Thank you.